Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We are unpacking some absolutely game-changing concepts today from James Clear's massive hit, Atomic Habits. Oh man, I have been so excited for this one. We're going to take a really close look at how we all handle our daily routines. You know, if you've ever felt completely stuck trying to build a good habit, or, let's be real, struggling to break a bad one, the framework we're diving into today gives us an incredible path forward.
So let's just jump right in with a pretty profound question. Can one tiny change actually transform your life? Because think about it. We've all been conditioned to believe that massive success requires massive, overwhelming action, right? We think we literally have to spend 3 hours grinding at the gym every single day to get fit, or we have to completely overhaul our entire diet overnight.
Right, and it's just so intimidating, and frankly, it's exhausting. But the material we're looking at today completely flips that whole idea on its head. It argues that it's actually the small, everyday choices, the ones we barely even notice, that truly dictate our future.
So here's our game plan for today's Explainer. We're going to start with the math behind the power of 1%, then explore why it's all about systems over goals, and dive deep into identity-based habits.
After that, we'll lay out a practical toolkit called the 4 Laws. And finally, we'll flip those laws upside down to talk about breaking bad habits.
All right, let's get into part 1, the power of 1%.
So, could you break down the actual math behind these marginal gains for us? Because when you really look at the raw numbers, it kind of shifts your entire perspective.
Oh, absolutely. The math here is just stunning. If you manage to get just 1% better each day for 1 year, you don't just become, 365% better. Thanks to the magic of compounding, you end up a whopping 37 times better by the time the year is done. It's this massive multiplier.
37 times? That is just incredible to think about. And of course, the flip side of that equation is true as well. If you get 1% worse each day for a year, you essentially decline all the way down to 0.
And when you map that out, the gap that opens up between that 1% improvement and a 1% decline over time is absolutely massive.
Yeah, it's basically the compound interest of self-improvement. See, a tiny change today doesn't really seem to matter much in the heat of the moment. Like, if you study a new language for an hour tonight, well, you still haven't learned the language, right? And because those results don't show up instantly, it's so easy for us to just slide right back into our old routines. But over a year or 2 years or 5 years, those daily 1% choices compound into massive, totally life-altering results, for better or for worse.
There's actually this brilliant analogy in the source material about flying an airplane. Imagine you're taking off from Los Angeles and you're heading to New York City. Now, if the pilot adjusts the heading just 3.5 degrees south right at takeoff, the nose of the plane moves just a few feet. It is barely noticeable.
Right, if you were sitting in the cabin, you wouldn't feel a thing. You'd think you were on the exact same flight path.
Exactly. But when you magnify that tiny shift across the entire distance of the United States, you end up landing in Washington, D.C. instead of New York. A microscopic shift at the very beginning leads to a completely different destination hundreds of miles away. And that is exactly how our daily habits guide the ultimate trajectory of our lives.
But okay, here's the catch. And honestly, this is exactly why so many of us quit before we ever see those compounding results. The author calls this the plateau of latent potential. It's essentially this lag time where our efforts are being stored up, not wasted, right before we see a major breakthrough. Think about an ice cube sitting on a table in a room that's, say, 25 degrees. You slowly start heating the room up, 26, 27, 28 degrees.
And the ice cube is just sitting there. Nothing is visibly happening. It's so frustrating because you feel like you're putting in all this work for absolutely nothing.
Totally. 29, 30, 31 degrees, still nothing. But then, boom, at 32 degrees, the ice finally begins to melt. That 1 degree shift, which seemed no different than any of the previous temperature increases, suddenly unlocks a massive change. All your prior work wasn't wasted at all. It was just being stored until you finally crossed that threshold.
Which brings us to part 2, systems over goals.
This whole concept brings up a really interesting question. Why are we always so hyper-focused on the finish line instead of the actual race itself? Well, it's human nature, isn't it? We are totally obsessed with the final product. Goals are all about the result you want to achieve, like, winning a championship, getting that big promotion, or losing a specific amount of weight. But systems are about the everyday process that actually leads to those results. It's how the team practices every single afternoon, or the specific meals you pack for lunch. And the crucial takeaway here from the author is this exact phrase: you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Yes, exactly. If you want better results, you kind of have to forget about setting goals and instead focus entirely on your system. Think about it. Goals actually restrict your happiness because you're basically telling yourself, I can't be happy until I finally cross that finish line. A systems-first mentality lets you be satisfied anytime your daily system is running. You actually get to enjoy the process of getting better.
Moving right along, here is part 3, identity-based habits.
So how does this systems thinking tie into the absolute deepest layer of behavior change? Well, we normally take this outside-in approach when we're trying to change. You start with the goal, the external outcome, and you just kind of hope it eventually changes your internal identity. But the alternative is an incredibly powerful inside-out approach, where you focus on identity-based habits. You start right at the core with who you wish to become, and you let that drive the entire process and the final outcomes. The core argument here is that true behavior change is actually identity change, because if you don't change the underlying belief about yourself, the habit just will not stick.
The source material gives us a fantastic real-world example to illustrate this. Imagine 2 different people who are trying to resist a cigarette. The first person gets offered one and says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit."
Which sounds perfectly reasonable. I mean, we hear people say that all the time.
We do, but think about it. That person still believes they are a smoker who is just trying to be something else. Now, the second person declines by saying, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." It is such a tiny shift in vocabulary, but it reflects a massive fundamental shift in their underlying beliefs. They no longer identify as someone who smokes. Behavior that doesn't align with how you see yourself just will not last. Your identity has to be the anchor.
All right, that takes us to part 4, the 4 laws. So once you actually have the right identity in mind, how do you go about building the practical habits to support it? Well, the author breaks every single habit down into a 4-step loop: cue, craving, response, and reward. And from that loop, we get these 4 laws to help us build good habits almost effortlessly. Law 1, make the cue obvious. Law 2, make the craving attractive. Law 3, make the response easy. And Law 4, make the reward satisfying. Think of these like 4 specific levers you can pull in your daily life. When they are all in the right position, creating a good habit is nearly effortless. But when they're in the wrong position, it is almost impossible to get any traction.
Let's look at a super practical application of the first law. Make it obvious. The text outlines this brilliant, actionable strategy called habit stacking.
The idea is, instead of trying to build a brand new habit completely from scratch, you anchor it to something you already do every single day without fail.
Exactly. Say you want to read more books. You already have a reliable morning routine, right? You wake up, you make your bed, you take a shower. You just stack the new habit right in the middle of that chain. So the new flow becomes wake up, make my bed, place a book on my pillow, and then take a shower. Now when you finally go to bed that night, the book is sitting right there, practically staring at you. You aren't relying on willpower anymore. You just always have a game plan built straight into your environment. I absolutely love that strategy. Now let's talk about the third law. Make it easy. My absolute favorite tool for this is the 2-minute rule. Honestly, it almost sounds too simple to even work.
It really does. At first glance, it sounds like you aren't doing nearly enough to actually make a difference.
Right? But the core idea is that a new habit should take less than 2 minutes to do. Like reading before bed is pretty daunting after a long, exhausting day. But reading 1 page, that is incredibly easy. You scale down 30 minutes of yoga to simply taking out your yoga mat, or running 3 miles just becomes tying your running shoes. The entire goal here is just to create a 2-minute gateway habit to help you overcome that massive initial friction of starting. Because once you start doing the right thing, it is so much easier to just keep going. You're basically just mastering the art of showing up.
So that gets us started, but how do we make sure we keep going day after day? Well, that brings us to the 4th law, make it satisfying. The text lays out what it calls the cardinal rule of behavior change, which is what is immediately rewarded is repeated, and what is immediately punished is avoided.
It's just how we're wired. Our human brains evolved to prioritize instant gratification. We will naturally prefer a small reward right now over a much larger reward sometime in the distant future. So if we want a new habit to actually stick, we need to feel immediately successful after doing it, even if it's in a really small way. That immediate hit of satisfaction is the crucial signal that tells our brain, hey, that felt good, let's definitely do this again next time.
Which leads us to our final section, Part 5, Breaking Bad Habits. Okay, so we've covered how to build good habits, but how do we eliminate the toxic ones that are dragging us down? This is where the beauty of this whole system really shines. To break a bad habit, you literally just invert the 4 laws we just talked about. If you want to stop doing something, you do the exact opposite of what you do to start.
Right, so instead of making it obvious, you make it invisible. Like if you find yourself spending way too much time scrolling on your phone, just hide it in another room while you work. You're just reducing your exposure to the cue.
Exactly. You make it unattractive, you make it difficult by adding lots of friction, and you make it unsatisfying. By simply pulling these exact same levers in the opposite direction, you can effectively dismantle bad routines by stripping away the cues, the ease, and the rewards that keep them alive.
This has been such a powerful explainer today. Let's summarize everything we've covered into 3 crystal clear, actionable takeaways that you can start implementing right now. First up, forget about perfection. Just aim for that 1% daily improvement. As we saw, those tiny marginal gains compound wildly over time.
Second, shift your focus away from the finish line. Focus heavily on your systems and your daily processes, not just your end goals. And third, and maybe this is the most profound one, shift your identity. Start acting like the exact type of person you want to become. Ask yourself things like, what would a healthy person do in this situation? Or what would a successful writer do? And let that guide your tiny daily choices.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you all with a final, really provocative thought from the author, known as the paradox of the coin. If you give a person one single coin, they aren't rich. But what if you add another? And another? At some point, you have to admit that wealth is built one tiny coin at a time. And the exact same principle is true for your habits. Can one tiny change transform your life? Well, maybe not immediately. But 1,000 of them? Absolutely, no question. Your life is ultimately transformed by these small, unrelenting choices. So get out there, start stacking those coins, and watch how your atomic habits tip the scales of your life. Thanks so much for joining us on this explainer, and we will catch you all next time.